How's your day going?
Good. So your dad said you had a volleyball tournament that was going to go on today or something?
My sister had one.
Oh, your sister had it. Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
He maybe said that. I don't know. Sometimes he gets this.
Alright. If you just want to sit there. Alright. So I didn't get to meet you when all of you came in. I didn't get to meet you at all. So just, I don't know. I want to get to know you, and I'm really bad at getting to know people because I'm kind of antisocial. But that's okay. But all I know about you is that you're into sports. I think that's what I remember. But I don't know. Tell me a little bit about yourself. Like, what are some of your hobbies?
So yeah, I do play sports, play volleyball. Done tons of other sports too. But that's one that's in season right now. And then play the clarinet
Okay.
and the piano, and guitar and ukulele.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And then I like decorating and like interior design, kind of like
Okay.
stuff like that, like reorganizing my room and redecorating my room and painting and stuff like that. And I really like art. Art's fun.
Yeah. Is there any particular like area of art that you're interested in?
Not really. Like I like all of it in general.
In general.
But I'm probably also like using pencils, but I've been trying to get better at watercolor.
Oh, that's awesome.
My grandpa was like amazing at it and did tons of like paintings for people and stuff like that. So I've been trying to learn a little bit.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah. I'm an art major.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. And so I'm actually doing art education.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
what I'm planning on going into. And I'm emphasizing in like 3 different areas. And yeah, I really love drawing. But I've really picked up or started loving photography.
Yeah, photography is so fun.
Yeah, that's something I really, really like. And that's actually something that I wanted to kind of use today. It's just like I wanted to talk about some pictures that I've gotten. I asked you to bring some too, which is nice if you got them, which is awesome. But first of all, I actually want you to do something real quick for me, and I don't have a pencil. I'll grab you one. But I don't really have this left over. But I asked you this several weeks back of like what your definition of beauty is, and I was just wondering if you could write it down for me again.
I don't know if it'll be the exact same.
Oh no,
No,
that's actually really perfect. That's really perfect for this. I don't want the same thing. Okay. And are you thirsty or anything?
No, I'm good. Thank you though.
Alright, so what did you put down there?
So I put being pleasing to one's eyes or emotions, and then I put having a glow of happiness.
Ooh, the glow of happiness. That's awesome. Can you explain that a little bit for me, or like just your thoughts?
Yeah. I don't know, sometimes someone like may not be the prettiest, like, like physically, but I think being like beautiful can also be something like that's inside you, and if you're always happy, I think that kind of brings out your inner beauty a lot. And if you're like smiling or if you're just kind to others, then people see you as beautiful, even if it's not like physically like you have the prettiest eyes or the prettiest hair or something like that.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, I definitely agree with that. There's an inner beauty that just people have. It's kind of interesting because I don't feel like everyone gets that.
Yes.
I mean,
Very true.
I don't know, I find it's kind of interesting because, like, I don't know, you'll see on TV or maybe even music, like, it seems like it's said a lot of times that there's inner beauty, but it's just so interesting. It's just so interesting to me that, like, even though it is kind of put out there, it's still not believed the same way. But, so yeah, I really like that thought. So, um, so like I said, I asked you to bring some images of like what you thought was beautiful and what you thought was ugly, and I was just wondering if you would be willing to kind of walk me through um, why why you picked the pictures you did and why you think they're beautiful or why you don't.
I'll start with okay. So this was the first one I chose because this is probably like my favorite picture of Christ. Um, and I think it kind of has that like glow of happiness to me, like just the way the aesthetics are in the picture. It like has the light around it, and it just looks like calm and peaceful. And I think a lot of times when people try and like post pretty pictures or beautiful pictures, it's kind of like fake happiness, I guess you could say. Like they're trying to act like they're having the best time when like and the stuff they post on social media and stuff is just like the good parts of their life, and it's kind of like yeah, kind of I guess just like fake. Like you can tell that sometimes someone isn't like really happy in the picture, they're just smiling because someone pulled up a smile or something like that.
Yeah. So when it comes to like kind of what people post on social media, like you said, and I totally agree with you. A lot of times we just see like the pretend happiness or just the good moments. Um, do you think that people should um, we should kind of change that a little bit and be more real?
Yeah, I think to a certain extent because like if you have because of your personal opinion about yourself, like you want others to see you at your best kind of thing. But also I think like sometimes there's like I don't know, do you know Al Caraway?
I don't.
She's
I've
like
heard of her.
the tattooed Mormon.
Yeah.
I think it's kind of cool because sometimes she posts pictures of like when she has really bad days or like when her hair's crazy or stuff like that because I think she's able to see like that she's not perfect all the time, and I think it's kind of just refreshing to see that like because when you're scrolling through your social media page, it's like the best of people, and you're like, oh, like it's really easy to be hard on yourself because everybody else looks so beautiful on all those pictures. But I think if people start like putting more of their real self on their social media, then it'll help everyone.
That's really neat. Yeah, I know. I'm definitely kind of guilty of. For me, like when it comes to social media, I tend to just post like when something good has happened, because I don't want to be. Because like for me, I have a hard time because I don't want to be like a burden on other people. Or sometimes you've got those friends who it's always the bad stuff. It's kind of like where do you find the balance or that common ground of like I'm just being real with you and not just be negative. But yeah. What else do we? What else? Yeah.
It's like yeah, this one's like one of my favorites. And I think this one's just beautiful because of like the message it sends because he's like serving someone else, you can tell. And you can just tell by the way that like his face is that he's like so happy and like loving, I guess you could say. And sometimes like the ugly version of that would be like I don't know, sometimes people post things a guy and a girl being like I don't know, inappropriate
Yeah,
kind
too
of
close together.
yeah. And but like that's it's so like pure, I guess you could say. That's a good word to describe it.
That's true. That's true.
And this is one.
Oh my.
Yeah.
Wow.
um yeah. This one's just kind of like the physical side of it, I guess, because I don't know, sometimes people try to get attention, I guess you could say, by wearing weird clothes.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
I think a lot of times the things that I think are ugly are a lot of times like inappropriate clothing, immodest, which I'm not gonna like look at pictures of that on purpose. But
No, right.
yeah,
Right. Yeah, and yeah, I hope you know I wasn't like
yeah. So that's like the physical aspect of it.
Nice. That is one of my favorite Griggles.
Yes.
That's absolutely one of my favorites.
Yeah, I just think that one's really like it sends a beautiful message, and all of the ones that it shows apart, like I think the message behind them is beautiful. Like you can like the story or the picture tells a story kind of, and
Yeah.
you can kind of like put yourself into the picture.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I totally agree, especially with this picture. And you kind of mentioned something interesting, how you said you kind of can put yourself in it in that story, or like in and I guess one of my questions, I guess that brought up a question in my mind of knowing like what's the story's about, um, does that ever change your view of a painting or of an image? Knowing maybe if the story is maybe not the prettiest story,
Um,
does that change how beautiful it is?
I think it depends on like the story that it's telling. Like sometimes it can be a sad story, but it can still be a beautiful picture.
Yeah.
Like you see pictures of people that have like I don't know, been abused or something like that. And it's really sad, and so sometimes you think of that as like not beautiful, but I think that the story that is they're telling in that picture is beautiful because they're letting people see that like life isn't perfect and there's a lot of bad things, but um, I think it can still be a beautiful story.
Awesome. Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. I agree. And over the years, I've started to kind of gain. I feel like I've started to gain kind of a broader perspective for myself of what I believe beauty is. Oh yeah, we got another.
This is probably like one of my favorites. That's my cousin, and I think that's just like a super neat picture because a lot of times like you see prom pictures and they're just standing up and so
Cliche.
beautiful. Yes, very. And I think that that picture is just like so honest and like it wasn't like trying to take the picture from here up, so
Yeah, it wasn't hiding
in the
anything.
picture. Yeah, I just think that was kind of cool. Yeah.
That's super, super neat. And I love that. I love how in this picture, like he's on her, on her level, which
Yeah.
I guess is kind of maybe common sense, but I don't know. I just
Yeah.
yeah,
That's
I
one of
like
the things I liked about it.
he got on her level, and it looks. I don't want to say it looks the same as any other prom picture because it obviously doesn't, but
Yeah, but
it's not super, super different either in a good way. I love it.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you have anything else? Or was that your last one? Yeah. And that's one of your friends, I take it.
That's my cousin.
Oh, your cousin.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, you're good.
That's right, your cousin. Yeah. That's awesome. And so the pictures that you showed here, I love like gospel the awesome pictures that you showed and like those images. I love them because it seems like it's a lot easier almost to find that inner glow, to learn about that and kind of develop how to notice and feel kind of like you said, that inner glow from those kinds of images. But sometimes I don't know for me, and I don't know if you've experienced this, but sometimes it's kind of hard to like find that same inner glow in other pictures that aren't like gospel related or even maybe things that like I don't agree with, but they could still be beautiful in their own way. So yeah, I've got a few pictures too. I don't know why I flipped all these over, but and so I just wanted to share some images with you, and I just kind of want to get some of your thoughts about them, or even if you have questions at all. And yeah, if you have any questions, feel free to ask.
Okay.
Because sometimes I just and I want you to ask questions if you have them. So when you look at these pictures, um, are some of them easier to see? Maybe see that, or feel that kind of inner glow than others.
Yeah, I would say. Especially like you can tell the brighter ones. Like your eye just picks them up more than like some of the darker ones.
They stand out.
Yeah.
Are there any that you look at and you kind of wonder, how could someone find that beautiful?
Not really. I think they're all really cool pictures, actually.
Okay, awesome. You also mentioned something or like we were talking about. Sometimes it's really neat when we have the picture or have the story behind images, because a lot of times that can change our perspective. And we kind of talked about that a little bit too, of how sometimes perspective can change for the better or for the worse. But sometimes we don't always have the story. So, and I guess for you, you don't have the story on any of these. You know, I myself don't have the story on all of them. But take this picture for example with the horse. When I first came across this horse, it grossed me out. It grossed me out to no end because something was obviously not right. You know, and but then I started kind of trying to think about it in a different way. You know, trying to maybe ignore the fact that his tummy's green and gross. um, and then I started just looking at the horse for all of its other aspects, and there were so many more beautiful things or neat things about it than its one flaw. And I kind of think about that in terms to like myself or like others. Sometimes I can get hung up on one little thing about myself, or maybe one little thing from a roommate or siblings. But I don't know. I don't know. Have you ever kind of had that experience?
Yeah.
Yeah. How does it usually go?
I think it takes like a lot of almost like courage to see past someone else's flaws, especially like when maybe it's not so physical, like maybe they're demeaning to others. I think it's a lot of it's really hard for you to be able to think of them as beautiful if like they're being mean to someone else or something like that, because I think like we don't see being mean as beautiful, but you have to like remember that there's so many different aspects to a person, and like they're going through, each person is going through something different, and they probably aren't like, they didn't just be me because they wanted to be me. Like maybe, um, I mean, there are those kind of people, but um, just trying to be like open-minded, and instead of like judging someone right off the bat, trying. I think that's one thing that everyone can try and work on, is not judging someone as soon as you see them, because that's what we do. Like as a human, we um, compare ourselves to other people and compare them to what we already know,
Yeah.
which everyone is so different that we really shouldn't be comparing, because nobody is the exact same as someone else. So it's
Yeah.
unfair to yourself and to the other person to be comparing them.
Yeah, no, I agree. And yeah, I find that a lot of times we start comparing like our worst with someone's best, or vice versa, their worst with our best, and it just it doesn't work,
Yeah.
know? Yeah. No, seriously though. So you did say something that was really interesting, because with your definition, you're talking about how it's anything that's uh, correct me if I'm wrong, but you were talking about how in your definition how you feel like it's anything that's like pleasing to the eye, right? Is that
Yeah.
so I guess um sorry, my brain just went blank.
You get it?
So what is some no, I don't, because we already talked. Sorry, sometimes I have to take a second to
Yeah,
gather
you're
my
good.
thoughts. Um so when I asked you if you thought about these pictures, and you had said and they're in their own way, like they're all pretty cool. They're cool images or neat images. Um, and I was just wondering, like, are they all? Do you really think that they're all pleasing to the eye? Like, even with the content that's in them?
Um, Probably not. Like, I think it depends on like how you're looking at the picture, because if you're looking at the flaw, I guess you could say, because I mean, you could say that there's a flaw in every picture. Like, the trees don't have leaves, like that could be a flaw. But I think if you see like past the flaws with your eyes, I guess you could say, and you're looking at like the broader picture, like the whole picture, like with the horse, instead of looking at its tongue, you're looking at how beautiful. Like the first thing I noticed was the color of the hair, because I don't know, I like horses a lot, and I think that the color of the mane like stood out to me first instead of the tongue, I guess. So seeing past the flaws in the picture can help.
That's true. Yeah. No, yeah, um, yeah, I get. Um, so the reason I bring that up is, I guess I wanted to talk about this one a little bit, this picture, and maybe it's kind of weird because it's all turned, but um, so like when I see this image, I think about times where I've been walking down the street and you see litter on the ground, or you see like cigarettes on the ground. Um, do you know what's some of the thoughts that go through your head when you see stuff on the ground, like cigarettes on the ground or something?
Um, I think the first thing that like comes to my mind is probably like thinking of like dirty, I guess you could say. And that's probably not always the best thing to think of. But naturally, like that's what your mind turns to. But I think in this picture, it's kind of neat because you think of snow, like I saw the snow, and snow is so white and like clear, and then having like the dirt and the grime. I think it kind of shows the contrast between the two, and you can kind of like there's a story in the picture. Like I said, um like having white snow and then getting it dirty, you can relate it to so many things in life,
Yeah.
and being
Yeah.
able to um, like become pure again, I guess you could say, become beautiful again, or you can also see the beauty in the picture, I think, because you see the white snow and you can think that's beautiful, or the person maybe that was smoking, that person could have been really beautiful and they just have made bad choices, I guess.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. So as I don't want to put you on the spot here, but like as we've been going on, have there ever been any questions that have come to you that you have or that have come to your mind or things you're just wondering about? Whether it has something to do with this or not.
Mm, I guess you could just kind of like, what do you see as beautiful? Yes.
Yeah, my definition. Well, I feel like I'm a lot very similar to you, and with like what you were kind of talking about with like this picture and a lot of these some of these pictures. And that I try to look past um like I try to look past the flaws, but even then, sometimes for me, it's the flaws that I almost find more beautiful than the things that aren't flawed. And so I feel like my definition is very broad because sometimes the things that I love taking photographs of are not pleasing to the eye, but I still find that even if the content itself isn't necessarily beautiful, sometimes the way you can compose a picture in a photograph can be beautiful, but the way that that thing is lighted or the contrast values, um, or just the contrast of the colors within it. Um, so for me, I feel like I have a very broad view of what I find to be beautiful. And for me, it's not just things that are pleasing, but it's sometimes the way that we expose them, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
Um,
Something that I just kind of thought of when you said that is like seeing the flaws as beautiful. And one thing with my cousin is I've always thought that like just the way she handles herself um, can be beautiful, and it's not because like she can't walk, so it's almost as if like you can see the strength in her through the way like through her flaw,
yeah.
because like she embraces it and she doesn't try to change. Like she didn't like in that picture. One thing that I've always thought was cool is that she wasn't like, "Can you just take the picture from here up so that you can't see my wheelchair?" Or like she wanted to be seen like how she really is.
No, yeah. I like that. I like that. And I love how people can be so inspirational to us in that way. And just as you were going to say that, I had a question that came into my head. It's a little personal, I think, but so if you don't want to answer, you don't have to. But are there any flaws about yourself that you find ugly or that you think are ugly?
Mm, I think a lot of like the flaws that I would see in myself um, would come because I was comparing myself to someone that I thought was beautiful, like in the sense of like beauty and like how the world sees it. So like I don't have super skinny legs, But I think one way that I've helped myself to kind of see past that is that I work out every day. Like,
Okay.
so obviously I'm not going to have super skinny legs because I have muscle or, um, yeah, just kind of stuff like that. Like, I think most of the stuff that I would say about myself that I wasn't beautiful would be things that I find myself comparing to someone else that I would have thought was beautiful.
Okay. Gotcha. And I love how you kind of led me to kind of like the next thought I was kind of having of how, like you said, sometimes we compare ourselves, and about whatever it is we don't feel beautiful about ourselves. Cause yeah, I totally agree. I think a lot of times we are comparing ourselves to something else. Um, but what I love is how you're saying like you try to overcome that. And so another thought I was having was what how why do you think it's difficult for some people to be able to think the way you do in terms of trying to overcome uh,
Mhm.
some of those flaws or
I
how they
think
see them?
just like our society today, like they don't, um, is it like not really like accept the flaws, but like they don't try to show the flaws. I guess you could say. So like they would have taken that picture and just done it from her shoulders up. And I think that's why it's hard because a lot of times people aren't accepting of the flaws, so you don't want to put yourself out there um, in the flaws because other people judge you, and I think that's really like self-deprecating to you because um, that like diminishes your worth to yourself, and it makes it hard to see past the flaw if someone's always telling you that it is a flaw. Yes, and then I mean, someone can tell you that it's a flaw and it's still beautiful, but if they're saying it as like it makes you an ugly person, then I think that's when it's hard to like overcome
Yeah, no, I agree. Um, yeah, I agree. Sorry, I say that a lot.
that.
Um, so knowing that, like you said, knowing that there's a lot of people in society or a lot of people in general who are kind of affected by society, what are things that we can do to help either our peers or just help people in general to how can we change that mindset that society has?
um, I think one of the biggest things you can do is just be like accepting. I think a lot of things that like are hard with physical flaws that you have are people like staring at you. And that's one thing that I've noticed through my cousin is like we go to Lagoon for family reunion, and you just get so many looks, and they're not necessarily trying to like look at you and judge you. Like sometimes they look at you and smile, but I think sometimes it's just hard um, when people are like focusing in on your flaw when you see it because you know that they're seeing it and you don't really know how they're thinking. Maybe they're really not thinking that
Right.
it's ugly. They probably, I don't know, maybe
Yeah.
they aren't, but I think in your mind, when someone does that, they think like, oh, they're judging me. And so I think when you meet someone, instead of like first looking for their flaws or at their flaws, just like talking with someone in general, I think helps. Um, and like yeah, it's okay to like look at someone,
Yeah.
but being able to like acknowledge that they have flaws and so do you, and like being able to move on past that and accepting it as part of who they are can help. So like I don't know, with my cousin it'd be like just like having a normal conversation and not treating them as though like they're different. and that's one thing that was super hard for her because she was adopted from China, and um, it's almost like she got too much sympathy for what it was. Like, people, oh, I'm so sorry that you're in a wheelchair. And I think that sometimes we just need to accept that, like, each of God's children has their own trials that they were put on this earth to go through, and we're not necessarily doing them a favor by just, like, pitying them, I guess. So if you just treat them like a normal person and, like, remind them that, like, just because they have a flaw, that doesn't define them. It's just a part of who they are, and they are still beautiful, even with the flaw.
Yeah, I like that. I like that a lot. So I guess another question I've got for you. Sorry, lots of
No, you're
questions.
good.
Is has your idea, has your definition changed at all as we've been talking?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. How so?
Um, I think the word pleasing kind of, I don't know, it's not the best word to use because some things really aren't pleasing to look at, but they can still be beautiful. And I think being beautiful isn't all appearance.
Yeah.
Which kind of, like, in the first sentence, not necessarily the second part of it, but, like, in the first sentence, it's a lot of, like, someone's appearance. But, like, I think glow is a good word to use because um, it's not necessarily, like, their looks, it's the image that they're giving off,
Yeah.
I guess. So I think you could be, like, not a very pleasing to look at person, but you could still be beautiful because the image that you present of yourself is, like, of worth, of value, and, like, you're a good person, because I think a lot of times people that are really beautiful can give off the image to other people that they're better than you. And I think something that I've learned is that people with, like, flaws, especially, like, really big ones, are able to see past other people's flaws, and they are able to, like, see their inner beauty and see, like, the image that God would see.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah, kind of the text, or not textbook definition, but kind of that deeper definition of Christ-like charity. I feel like that's kind of what you're describing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. And I find it kind of interesting that sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes it takes either having flaws or seeing flaws in yourself or whatever it might be, or big flaws, little flaws, to be able to see deeper.
Yeah.
I
So
mean,
true.
sometimes I'm like, why do we have to experience our flaws, big or little, before we get to be able to see the beauty in other people?
Yeah.
I don't know.
So it's true.
Kind of crazy. I don't know. But, my hope from this lesson was that I don't know, whatever your definition was, that it would grow a little bit was my hope. Because this semester I've been taking a class and we've been talking a lot about art and beauty, and I learned that it is so complex and it's hard to define. Because it seems like just when you think you've got it, whether it's kind of like what the church gospel's talking about, which is totally true, believe it, it's totally true, or like, and then as soon as you think you've got it, it changes. Something comes into play, or someone says something that'll change it. It's like, oh, I guess, kind of like we were talking about with, like, some things are just, they're gross that can still be beautiful. And anyway, it's just, sorry.
I was just saying, yeah, I agree.
But, yeah. Was there any other thoughts you've got?
I just think the one thing that like has definitely, like, kind of clicked in my mind was that not necessarily looking past a flaw, but looking at, you could use the word at someone's flaw and
Yeah.
like being able to still see it, them as beautiful. It was something that kind of stood out to me because of like what we were saying about like the different pictures, like instead of just looking past the flaw, like seeing it as part of them and just accepting that they're still beautiful even though they have a flaw.
Right.
I think is something important that we can learn.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Totally agree. I was just gonna say something and my mind went blank. But yeah, I mean that's pretty much all I've really got for you. Um, I don't know unless you want to know anything about me. I feel like I don't know, or but I don't know, or want to tell me anything about you.
Um, I think it's a really interesting topic to learn about, like because, like you said, there are so many different like aspects of beauty that a lot of times we, with our minds, only are looking at one. I
Yeah,
think, which is something that I think Christ has developed, is that he can see all the different aspects of beauty at once, which allows him to see like who a person truly is. And I think because we're not perfect, we often have like narrowed minds, kind of have our blinders on, and
yeah,
we're just seeing like one part of their beauty. And I think that being beautiful is like such, has so many different aspects. You can have a beautiful personality, beautiful looks, there's just so many different things that come into play when you're looking at beautiful. And if you really think about it, like we're such amazing people and we have so many things that are about us that are beautiful. And a lot of times we kind of like undervalue, like we take ourselves below what we really are and how amazing we are. And I think it's important to see, and like sometimes you just need to kind of sit down and think about it and see yourself how God sees you and see that you have so much worth and value that you don't even realize and you're not probably not looking for it.
right.
But there's so many things in other people and in yourself that are beautiful and you can
Help bring it out.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I love that. Um, and I think you're totally right. Like, there are so many different forms of beauty. Like, today we've been talking a lot about visual beauty, but I think we also kind of touched a little bit on, like, moral beauty as well. You know, like when we were talking about the cigarette, or um, earlier you were kind of talking about, like, sometimes people choose to be immodest, you know, and um, some aspects that can be seen as, you know, not morally beautiful. Um, you know, when thinking, I guess, in terms of kind of some of our beliefs. Um, I guess taking that kind of that example, um, what can what can you do? And maybe we already talked about this, so if I'm repeating myself, I apologize. But taking that example that you were kind of talking about, if you can remember when you were talking about how just like your views about like immodesty. Um, is there any new ways that maybe you can approach that thought, or that thought that you had?
Yeah, I think um, like we were kind of talking about at the end, that that's just one part of
Yeah,
being beautiful and um, being able to accept that like they have different views than you do. And a lot of times in like other cultures, there are things that are beautiful that we don't think are beautiful.
yeah,
Like, but I think being able to recognize that other people have different, everyone has a different definition of beauty, and especially like you can see in contrast to other cultures that aren't our own.
mm,
Um, and you can be able to acknowledge that like that's beautiful in their own way because they're being themselves and they can see themselves as beautiful even though it's not your definition of beautiful. And I think
yeah,
being able to do that just shows like how much of like an amazing person that person is, because they're not changing their version of beautiful so that it's someone else's definition of beautiful.
Yeah.
I think with like the modesty part of it, um, sometimes I mean like it's not necessarily right, but they can still see themselves as beautiful, and I think that that's a really neat thing to be able to um, have your own definition of beautiful and stick to it without trying to change to be this person's beautiful and this person's beautiful, and being able to still see yourself as beautiful even if it's not the other person's definition of what they think is beautiful.
Yeah. You kind of, yeah, it's really interesting, things that you're saying, because, like you said, in a way, she can kind of, like you said, she kind of shows that courage, like, that she doesn't have to change. She doesn't feel pressured that she has to change herself. I guess, I don't know, I just had a thought in my head of, just like the culture of our church, and it kind of makes me wonder, why are we? Why are we so big about being? Sorry, I'm trying to think of how I'm trying to ask it. Do you ever have thoughts in your head?
Yes.
Just every time to say something, it
doesn't
doesn't
work
come out.
out.
It's like, wait, why doesn't make sense here, not out here?
Yeah.
But yeah, like I'm trying to say, why do you think the church's culture is kind of like that? How we encourage people. Why is it so important that we encourage people to have a similar view of modesty?
Because I think
If it's more courageous, if it shows courage, not to be your own person.
I think immodesty brings about a lot of like immoral sins, and I think that's one of the main reasons why the church we have the standards we do with modesty, because it leads to bad things, having sexual transgressions and stuff like that. And I think that's one thing that is so hard for us being in a church is I think a lot of times we have this mindset that um, because we're supposed to be modest, we can only wear this kind of clothes and this and this, and I think a lot of times we start trying to like fit this mold of the church, but we can still be ourselves, and there's so many different ways to like portray a picture of you without doing extreme things like being super immodest or stuff like that. And I think that's one thing that is so hard about being a member of the church is being able to still express yourself without, like being immodest or doing wrong things. That makes sense.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. Yeah, and you're right. I think you're right. It's kind of difficult when you think about it too. Like, because like you said, in a way, she's trying to show personal courage that she doesn't care, or like that she's not going to let someone else define her. But at the same time, it's kind of hard because sometimes people dress in that manner because they have kind of low self-esteem, or they don't feel very great about themselves. And sometimes it's kind of hard because where's the line between trying to help encourage them to see that they are worth more? They don't have to dress that way to get attention or to prove themselves or whatever it might be. Where's the line between trying to help encourage them, to have that higher view of themselves, and stepping on someone's toes, like, I don't want to say taking away their agency, because, it's not quite that far, but, I don't know, where's the line between that? Trying to encourage someone to see a better view of themselves and then not diminishing their courage.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point to bring up, because a lot of times, like, it is that way. Like, you're trying to encourage someone to be themselves, but at the same time, you don't want to, like, there are still things that are wrong.
Yeah.
And, like, yeah, I don't know. It's kind of, there is definitely, like, where that line is of trying to get someone to fit the mold and trying to tell them that, like, it's still not okay to be immodest, even though, yeah, you know,
it's a hard question.
Yeah.
It's a hard question, and I bring it up because, like you kind of mentioned, that's a question that's brought up almost daily, like especially for members or non-members. And I feel like it's an important question because on the one hand, like as members, we want to try and help people see the gospel and see the true beauty, the inner beauty that is in them. At the same time, we don't want to judge them like harshly or make them feel awful.
Yeah.
It's like, what do we do?
Yeah.
But is there anything that we talked a little bit or talked about that could maybe help us find a solution to that question?
I think, like, looking at the whole picture is really helpful in that situation because someone gave a talk in church a while ago in our sacrament meeting, and they were talking about how they were teaching someone the gospel. Oh, I think it was in conference actually when he was teaching. They were trying to figure out if they should build a temple, and the people were like investigating the Mormon culture, and he was like, I could have said that, well, this actually is Christchurch. It's not the closest we've come to it is, but he didn't in that moment, and I think being led by the Spirit to know when someone is ready to accept that, because I think that is a hard part with like going on a mission is there's a difference between like teaching someone about your faith and trying to convert them and not offending them at the same time, like because a lot of times people see that as, oh, they think I'm wrong and they're judging me. Like that's a hard thing about bringing people to the gospel, and I think being able to like see the whole picture and being able to like wait for the Lord's timing, and being able to be guided by the Spirit for when that person, when their mind has been prepared to like receive the information and like critiquing, I guess, that they need, because some people like they really aren't ready to hear that you're immodest, you need to change.
Right.
Like sometimes you just have to learn that you might just need to befriend them first and become good friends with them, and it doesn't have to all happen at once.
Yeah, no, I like that. And that was definitely kind of a difficult thing on my mission too. Because like you've said a couple times before, like there's just some things that we have learned or we view as wrong is wrong. But I like how you said like sometimes it's not about just going in there bluntly and saying you can't wear this or you shouldn't wear that because of such and such reason. But yeah, I like how you said like befriend them first, and also sometimes I think just being an example can also help too. Because I think sometimes, I don't know about you, but I feel like sometimes I learn the best, not so much being told this is how it is, but being given the opportunity to discover it. Whether that's watching examples or I don't know, other ways.
One thing that just the way that you said that made me think of, I had this teacher in 5th grade, and he wouldn't like teach the math lesson as in like he'd get up and show you how to do it. He would give us like the right things that we needed to be able to figure it out, and he let us figure it out in our minds. And I think that makes like in a gospel sense, it would make like your personal testimony of it so much stronger than if someone was just like, hey, this is what you do, this is how you do it. And I think we need to realize that like it's a process and it's going to take time, and each person has their own journey of being able to find what they need to do is right. And um, sometimes we need to just like allow people to figure it out a little bit because it'll make them a lot stronger if they're figuring it out for themselves rather than like just someone telling them.
Right. Right. No, I agree. Um. Yeah, I like that. You know what I love is that like just like the example you gave about like the math class of how he's teaching the math class. And what I love is that about what I love about beauty and just like so just like anything in general. It's like and like art. What I love about art is that it connects to everything. Um, it's not, and what I love about it is it doesn't just have to. Like we've talked about this, a lot throughout. That we've been talking is that beauty and art it isn't always just something that you see. Um, and one of the things that I love is that like every single one of us, in a way, and this might sound cheesy or corny, but each of us in our own way, we are kind of a work of art, and I don't know, I love what we've been talking about. You are very wise. I feel like you are very wise for your age, and I have really enjoyed talking about them.
Me too.